constitutional reforms culminating in the single transferable vote. And when do we want it? As soon as we can understand what on earth it means. These issues, which were once dismissed so patronisingly and so arrogantly by the government as being chattering classes issues, are going mainstream. And though it's a tall order that we should try to inject these complicated ideas into mainstream political discourse, ladies and gentlemen, it is happening already. And the electorate is wising up. They're wising up to how badly they've been ripped off over the years, and they're wising up to how far the system could be reformed to turn it into a modern and democratic parliamentary system, as opposed to the joke that we have today. There's just a couple of things that I'd like to add to what the brilliant speakers we've heard so far have said. And one of them is to look at one of the implications of our first past the post system. We saw that chart, that bar chart that Guy held up, the bar chart which has so inspired us all. And the reason why it's like that is that the votes of the big parties of Labour and the Tories are concentrated in clusters. The Tories have their votes concentrated in the English shires. Labour has its votes concentrated in post-industrial inner cities, and that's the way they like it. It works very well for them. Whereas the Liberal Democrats and the smaller parties, their votes are much more widely dispersed, which is why they elect far fewer MPs than they should do. And what this means is that the more divided, the more inequitable, the more ghettoised this country is, the better Labour and the Conservatives do out of it. And I wonder to what extent the extraordinary fact that we learnt quite recently that the last year's figures for inequality were the worst this country has experienced since records began, whether that fact might in any way be influenced by the very simple calculation that those two major parties make, that the more inequitable we are, the better they are likely to do in elections. And what a switch to proportional representation does, and to the electoral reforms we're calling for, is to allow parties to see that equality is actually in their interests, that a concentration of votes in these terrible class-based clusters that we have in the country at the moment, these ghettos into which people have been pushed, is actually going to be bad for the parties as well as being bad for the country. It would resolve the conflict of interest which currently pollutes our politics. There's one other thing I want to say, that however fair our voting system is or appears to be, even if we get this fabled single transferable vote, even if we can understand what the heck it means, we still would be faced with a profoundly unfair political system unless we also reform political funding. And I was struck a few days ago seeing the well-known conservative blogger Tim Montgomery whinging about the fact that the Conservatives had twice as much money to spend in the last election as Labour did, and thanks to Lord Ashcroft's Belize billions, they were targeting it very effectively, apparently, on the marginal constituencies, and yet, damn it, we still didn't get an absolute majority. How wrong is that? And you think, well, sorry, that's not where the unfairness lies. The unfairness lies in the fact that a few offshore billionaires like Lord Ashcroft can buy the entire British political system. And that however fairly we can vote, if one party is allowed to spend disproportionately more than any other party for the sole reason that it is more appealing to big business and billionaires than the other parties are, then this country continues to be run by big business and billionaires. So it's important and essential as it is to demand electoral reform, it must be part of a wider electoral and constitutional reform. And an essential and an irreducible part of that reform is greatly to overhaul the way in which political parties are funded in this country, so that we have a fair settlement which reflects not the wealth of their backers, but the power of their support among the electorate. Fair votes and fair funding is at least halfway towards fair politics. Thank you very much.